creepypastas are enough to keep many of you up at night. But the events described in these tales have gone far beyond just campfire stories for the digital age. Many people claim that their encounters in these stories are real events. Events that make some lose sleep and others go completely insane. Here are the 10 freakiest creepypastas ever told, Part 4. Number 10 is Sonic.exe. A man named Tom received a Sonic the Hedgehog video game in the mail from a friend of his named Kyle. Kyle warned him that it was in his best interest not to boot it up and that he should destroy it immediately. As a huge Sonic fan, Tom ignored the warning and launched the video game. Thinking that it was just a modified version of the game, he soon noticed something was very wrong. Sonic's eyes were now black with red irises, and he had blood dripping from them. The background and atmosphere of the game had lots of gore as well as dead animals everywhere. Sonic also kept killing other characters while saying, "I am God." No matter what happened, the player's character always died and he had to restart. Tom actually tried at one point to throw out the game, but was haunted by his own bleeding Sonic plushie. Number 9 is the Weeping Angel. Similar to the villains in the television show Doctor Who, stone statues can be unsettlingly realistic. While trying to find their perfect home for their growing family, a couple expecting their first child toured a house with some weird angel statues in the garden. As they moved about, the statues seemed to be in different positions each time that they looked at them. Nervous, they rejected that potential home and moved on to another, only to find similar statues to the first house that they looked at. Becoming suspicious, the husband noticed that the agent had vanished and tried to escape the house with his wife. He tried calling the agent, but there was no response. As they ran down the street, they realized that the angels were actually chasing them. Since then, the only thing that existed of the couple was a single police report that read that the couple ended up dead. Number 8 is Squidwards Suicide. Told by a former intern at Nickelodeon Studios, this creepypasta tells the story of an unaired episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that the intern had found. Instead of a kid's cartoon show, he and the crew with him are treated to an unsettling episode featuring the character Squidward. For some unknown reason, everyone in the episode seemed to have red, realistic-looking eyes. It soon cuts to Squidward sitting on a bedside, crying over a failed concert that he had to put on. So overwhelmed by this, along with the terrible negative feedback that he had received, he then takes his own life with a shotgun in full gory detail. Then, a single still frame of a dead child mangled on the road is shown. Adding to the horror, a faint voice is cut into the animation, and the sound of someone laughing can be heard. Number 7 is Pen Pal. Pen Pal is a series of tales about a kindergarten student who releases a balloon with a letter asking for a reply, an activity he participated in with the rest of his class. But as other kids' letters came back from the people who found theirs, the narrator noticed that his fails to return. That is, until one day his teacher hands him a letter that begins a chain of unsettling events. It turns out that the boy's letter was found by a creepy man who proceeds to stalk him mercilessly, even living in a crawl space under the narrator's house for a while. Years later, the stalker kidnaps Josh, the boy's best friend, dyes Josh's hair the same color as the narrator's, and then kills Josh's sister. He then manipulates Josh's dad into unknowingly burying both the stalker and Josh so that they can be together forever. Number 6 is Psychosis. Psychosis tells the story of John, a man who becomes increasingly paranoid due to a lack of physically seeing another person for a long time. He tries to convince his friends to come over and visit. However, everyone seems to either decline or go offline. He eventually gets a video call from a friend, but something seems off. He begins to believe that the electronics in his life are being controlled by something called the Entity, which can take them over whenever it wants. He also believes everyone who communicates with him is lying in an attempt to get him to leave his apartment and become possessed like they are, because the Entity can also take over people through their eyes. In a desperate move to stop the Entity from taking him, John blinds himself. In the end, we learn that the Entity is in fact real and has taken over the doctor who is in fact seeing him. Number 5 is Ted the Caver. Written as journal entries, Ted the Caver tells of a man named Ted who finds a cave with a small passage that he can't get through. He decides to widen the passage so that he can explore it, and spends several days with a friend using hammers to widen the hole just enough to enter it. Eventually, they make their way into the cave. However, the deeper that they get into the tunnel, the more things get eerie, and strange noises and feelings haunt them. One of the men even finds a strange symbol, claiming that it resembles something from the Blair Witch Project. Soon after, they encounter what's believed to be some sort of unknown creature that tries to attack them. Abandoning the cave, the eerie feeling seems to follow Ted home, and he later decides that he has to go back to the cave to conquer it. That was his last entry. Number 4 are the portraits. After spending the day hunting in a massive forest, a hunter realizes that he's lost track of time, and it's quickly getting dark out. Not knowing which path will get him home safely, and large foliage making it difficult to navigate, he searches around until he finds a cabin in a small clearing with a door open. After looking in it, he decides to spend the night there and explain himself to the owner later. The hunter enters a room and sits on a bed, only to find several incredibly detailed portraits of people with their faces twisted into expressions of hatred and malice hanging on the wall, all of which seem to be staring directly at him. Ignoring them, he falls asleep, but when he wakes up, there's sunlight beaming in, and he finds that there are no paintings, only windows. Number 3 is You'll Never Even Know. After hearing his neighbor bragging about how perfect their new smart home security system is, a young college student hacks into it and becomes able to see much of their house through the installed cameras. However, he ends up seeing much more than he bargained for when a basement camera captures a gray humanoid blob that moves about the house, causing mischief like a curse and haunting the family that lives there. Though the boy can see it, the people physically present never quite seem to, always being in a different room or asleep when it's present. He tries to bring attention to it, but ends up attracting the ghostly figure's attention instead. The boy then realizes the entity only appeared to him when the system was integrated with his own, and begins to disconnect himself from the technology. However, although he attempts to ignore what he witnessed, the humanoid figure begins haunting him. Number 2 is the dream of every dentist. 10 dentists participate in a meeting organized by a man in black, and are told that if they tell the man running it about the dream, that they get $5,000 each. At first, they're very hesitant, explaining that he won't understand even if they told him about the dream. One eventually agrees and explains that they all had the same dream about weaving a needle and thread through a human's head, but get frustrated when it always ends up inside due to there being 7 holes, the 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and 1 mouth. To their delight, the man reveals his stenographer, who had been there recording the whole conversation, has no mouth. The dentists are delighted and relieved to see that there are only 6 holes now. However, that's when the man takes out a real needle and thread and says, "Let's see if it works." And number 1 is Bedtime. Soon after his older brother switches rooms, an 8-year-old boy has a room of his very own. Unfortunately, he also gets an unexpected invisible roommate. Sleeping on the top bunk, the boy often wakes up to the sound of the creature on the lower bunk, thrashing about as if having a tantrum. When he tells his parents about this, they're dismissive, so he removes the mattress from the bottom bunk and places a desk in its place. That night, he awakens to find the invisible entity in his own bed with him. As he tries to slip out of the seemingly sleeping invisible creature's grasp, it suddenly wakes up and tries to grab him, clawing away relentlessly. Fighting back, he manages to escape and runs into his parents' room. Soon after, he convinces his parents to swap rooms with him. That's when, immediately after, his parents decide that it's time to move out.